potential in around these areas here from Baton Rouge upwards into far southwestern parts of Mississippi. We're going to have to keep our eye on that over the next couple of hours as maybe another 2, 3, maybe 4 inches of rainfall could fall, and also starting to see some outer bands affecting places like Houston and far southeast Texas and far southern parts of Louisiana. Flash flood watches now extend into far southwest Tennessee and, of course, a good part of Louisiana under this flash flood watch. Let me time this out for you as we head on through the rest of this morning. Heavy rainfall could fall. Also could see a couple of tornadoes pop up in the northeast quadrant. Still expected to see landfall somewhere in the south central parts of Louisiana sometime late this afternoon into this evening hours, and then eventually push farther inland as well. So don't forget, you can get even more coverage, Hurricane Delta, on social media. Make sure you check out Pattern from everything from Twitter to Snapchat. Taking a live look at Houston. The rain is certainly falling and the clouds are certainly out there. We'll be right back.
America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Homes and businesses in Lafayette, again, now boarded up. Busy boarding up yesterday and the day before in preparation for Hurricane Delta. Delta is expected to make landfall Friday evening as a powerful Category 2 storm. Officials are encouraging residents to evacuate, but for those who stay, they should be prepared to ride out the storm alone.
If people decide to stay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
Yeah, wind and rain and water rise, too. As we watch Delta make its approach, we should start seeing all those things increasing in coverage and impact and intensity. The storm surge warnings from just west of Sabine Pass to Gulfport, Mississippi, and just east of you. So this is where we are expecting some water rise. Now, the way it works is that closer to the center and on the northeast side of the center is where the highest water rise would be because of it's where the strongest winds would be driving the Gulf of Mexico in. Right now, we've remained below 1.5 feet. Dauphin Island, 1.5 feet of water rise so far, but your flooding will increase almost a foot here in Lake Charles and expect it to go a little bit higher as we go through the day, maybe a 7 to 11 foot rise in the area here. So that storm surge potential in south central Louisiana east of the Cameron area is going to be greatest, closest to the center and the east side of the center, but still 2 to 4 foot rise, 3 to 4 foot rise here out across southeastern Louisiana. And also as you get near Port Lavaca and Galveston, maybe a 1 to 3 foot water rise from dry ground. Freshwater Bayou in Louisiana, high tide Friday at 11:52. So that's tonight. Rain and wind is going to continue to be pushing in even on the backside of Delta. So we may have some higher surges realized at that time, but the worst is probably going to be a little bit sooner, right before we see high tide, and probably don't have to worry about Sunday's high tide. But other areas that may have some coastal flood warnings with some water coming in: South Padre, Corpus Christi, Port Lavaca, even Galveston. There are coastal flood warnings in place, coastal flood advisories for coastal parts of not only Mississippi, but also Alabama around Mobile. That's where we could see a little bit of flooding come in. Your wave height forecast already seen some 30, 40 footers out across parts of the Gulf of Mexico now as we go through the afternoon. Some of those higher seas pushing in also, and with the wind pushing that water up against the Gulf of Mexico, certainly going to lead to some of that surge flooding. Well, Hurricane Delta's path could take it through Lake Charles, Louisiana, which still has mounds of debris across the city from Hurricane Laura 6 weeks ago. And as the Weather Channel's Justin Michael shows, that debris could be a dangerous factor in the coming hours.
The dangers here in Lake Charles, Louisiana are far and wide. This city is still filled with debris just like this from Laura, Hurricane Laura, that came through here about 6 weeks ago at the end of August. They've cleaned up about 1.5 million cubic yards of debris over the last 6 weeks, but there are still countless piles this big with this kind of building material all over this city. And with this, the possibility and really the expectation that we could have 80 to 90 mile per hour hurricane force winds and gusts coming through here tomorrow, a lot of this stuff could absolutely become projectiles. And that can be a deadly proposition if you find yourself in them. So many people did evacuate, but people here are scared, and some people had to stay. We actually caught up with some people earlier today at an area Walmart as they were getting those last-minute supplies, knowing they couldn't leave and they're scared after Laura. Listen to this.
Devastating, just knowing what our little city's going through. Again. Now, if Laura wouldn't have hit, I wouldn't have been as scared. But because Laura hit and because of all the debris we already have, that's what's making it scary.
It is a scary thought to have to stay through the storm. That family right there that was just talking, they have about 28 animals, and they could not leave their animals behind. So they're staying, and they're scared to do so. The good news is they are in the minority. We spoke with the mayor earlier tonight of Lake Charles, and they do know right now that more people evacuated for Delta than evacuated for Laura. And that's some really good news. Now, there are a lot of people sitting on the highways still. They've been sitting there for 8, 10, 12 hours trying to get west or north. But the point is people are leaving in mass numbers just to get away from Hurricane Delta and whatever it might bring. In Lake Charles, Louisiana,
As far as, well, Hurricane Delta goes, let's take a look at the latest wind speeds. And, yeah, we're still looking at winds a little below tropical storm force winds. Notice here the Green Canyon 338, it's a buoy that's out in the Gulf of Mexico. Sustained winds at 30 miles an hour. Actually had a wind gust just about 2 minutes ago, about 38 miles an hour. So we're right on the cusp of tropical storm force wind gusts. But we're going to eventually keep an eye on this because, yeah, the winds are going to eventually get worse, particularly as we get a little bit closer toward landfall. And there's still that potential, max wind potential in around where the eye wall, where the eye's going to be, and that eye wall of upwards of 100, 110 mile an hour plus, and that is going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye on. This will also lead to possibility for some power outages as well. So, yeah, we're looking at the worst coming ahead as we head on through the rest of this Friday. We want to bring you an update. Now, late last night, while reporting live from the street corner in Lake Charles, our Justin Michaels made a friend. We have a lot of social media people asking this question about this cat there. And want to know what happened with the cat. The cat is safe. That's good news, having been taken in by the sheriff's deputy and his wife. This is always something when you are evacuating, and particularly in these situations, always, always, always take your pet with you. That could have very well been a stray or someone's pet. That's why you want to microchip your pet, and that's why you always want to take your animals with you when you are evacuating because, well, this is what happens when they are left behind. Thankfully, this cat is safe. We'll be right back.
Daily dose of everything weather on Quibi. From the viral
Now to the weather video that we cannot stop watching.
to the vital
Get ready because we are in for another wet week.
and all the wonderful weather in between.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
It's almost unbelievable this is real.
When your cameras roll, our experts react.
Jaw-dropping.
Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
All right, this is the latest, the 4 o'clock a.m. Central Time advisory from the Hurricane Center. Not too much change. Winds stay the same, 120 Category 3. Pressure does stay the same at 953 millibars. Change, though, in its movement. Now moving north at 12 and now 200 miles south of Cameron, Louisiana. Some other changes. Tropical storm watch from east of the mouth of the Pearl River to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Discontinued. Storm surge warning has been discontinued from Ocean Springs Mississippi to the mouth of the Pearl River, Louisiana, including Lake Pontchartrain and Lake Maurepas. So some changes with the advisory, but the main stats, winds still the same, 120. Pressure still the same at 920, but that change in the forward speed or forward motion now moving on off toward the north now, starting to make that northern jog. Welcome back to our continuing coverage here of Hurricane Delta. For the survivors of Laura's onslaught in southwestern Louisiana, the thought of going through it all again with Delta is demoralizing. The Weather Channel's Robert Ray explains.
Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped apart the home of Deborah and Jerome Lestraps.
It's very draining, and to have to pack up and leave again, you know, that's a little stressful.
That's the bedroom area here.
Wind and water damage from that storm are forcing them to gut their home. Now they're worried again. What will Delta do?
Had to leave.
This is our home away from home, camping in our backyard.
The Lestraps have been living in this mobile trailer for 6 weeks. Jerome plans to ride out Hurricane Delta in their home that's being rebuilt, while Deborah is evacuating with her elderly mother.
Here I have an air mattress or a cot, and that's where I'm going to live here until all of this is over with.
So you're going to hunker down during Delta inside here?
Yes.
And why is that? Why aren't you leaving?
Because I want to be home to make sure that our home is okay, and you're not going to have looters that's going to be trying to get into your home and take what you have or make matters worse.
About 15 miles away in Iowa, Louisiana, the Becknells are in a similar situation, repairing their roof and getting ready to evacuate again.
It is like a dream, and you want to wake up, and it's not going to be here. You know, it's not going to be true, but it is. Sorry.
No, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's very, very emotional. Very. But you got to keep going, and you got to say, it'll be okay. You know, it's going to be fine, and it will be. We're strong people.
For 35 years, this has been home. The Becknells raised their kids here. Across the street, the broken trees from their yard are piled up. The neighbors, a few doors down, have set up a makeshift kitchen on the front lawn because their home isn't structurally safe. The last thing this block needs is another hurricane.
I believe that the Lord's going to protect us, and we'll have a home. Anyway.
What would you compare this to in your life? Anything else?
No, nothing. You just can't let yourself get down. It's easy to get down, but you have to stay strong.
Because that's what families here do during hurricane season. Stay Louisiana strong. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
And going to get together and do it again here with Delta now. The wind and the strongest winds in the center, not exactly in the same spot as Laura, but, you know, we're still going to have impacts for somebody in close to Lake Charles and Cameron, Lafayette, tropical storm force winds. The forecast is for a smaller wind field than we have with Laura. Look at Laura's wind field. Your hurricane force wind field a lot bigger and closer to Lake Charles and Cameron. Tropical storm force wind fields also was a little bit stronger too. So the track obviously closer to Cameron and Lake Charles, so stronger winds, especially on the east side of the center. This track is forecast to be a little bit further toward the east, so a little bit lower population center further east, but still there's most likely going to be pretty close to, if not, there will be hurricane force winds in most of this area here. A potential record for landfalls in a season in Louisiana. We are expected to tie 2002's record of 4 landfalls. Bertha, Tropical Storm Hannah, Isidore, and Hurricane Lily. Right now, we've got 3 landfalls, Cristobal, Marco, and Hurricane Laura. This would be the 4th tying that record that we did set back down in 2002. And Todd, you know, the season isn't over yet. There is another wave that's come off the coast of Africa or out in the East Atlantic that the Hurricane Center does have its eyes on for a small chance at developing over the next 5 days.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that we've already had, and Delta will be the 5th hurricane to make landfall on the continental United States. Let's take a look at the forecast fan here, and we'll take a little bit farther inland as well. It's not only a coastal thing, but Delta, as it works its way onshore, will continue to work its way and still close to hurricane force winds into interior parts of Louisiana before eventually will work its way as a tropical storm and eventually a depression and then a remnant low as we head into northern parts of Mississippi into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys as well. So as we look ahead, a lot of rainfall for areas not affected by landfall, but for areas in a good part of the southeast mid-Atlantic, showers and storms, some heavy rainfall could lead to localized flooding as well. And that extends into your Sunday as far north, a place like Washington, D.C., maybe as far north as New York City as well. So, of course, we have a team of meteorologists both in the field and here in the studio. They'll take you all through, up through, and after landfall here of Tropical Storm Delta. You can see all of them on your screen.
Age is just a...
And this morning, powerful Hurricane Delta is making a beeline for the U.S. Gulf Coast. The storm-weary state of Louisiana is bracing for impact. A major Category 3 hurricane will lash the coast with heavy rain, gusty winds, and the potential of life-threatening surge. Nearly 6 million people under tropical alerts from Mississippi to Texas, including the city of Lake Charles, which was devastated by Hurricane Laura just over a month ago. There's a lot of debris, a lot of homes that have tarps on them, and you don't need a lot of wind in order to toss that stuff around. Our around-the-clock coverage continues. This morning on AMHQ, we have a team of meteorologists spread out across Louisiana. Tevin Woon is in Lake Charles, just to my west. Jim Cantori is to my east, and Beau Bridge. Jen Carfagna will join us live from the Weather Channel studios. Hello from Jennings, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams. AMHQ here to get you informed of what you need to know as Delta makes landfall today. It will be this evening. An incredible 10th tropical cyclone to hit the U.S. in history. And that, by the way, is a record. The old record was 9, set back in 1916. We'll have a discussion on that a little bit later. But first, let's show you what it was like yesterday as people were trying to get out of town. Traffic on I-10 was bumper to bumper getting out of Lake Charles, the city of some 80,000 residents wounded by Category 4 Hurricane Laura 43 days ago. Now, limping as it is forced to stare down dangerous Hurricane Delta today. So let's look at the nuts and bolts of this thing. Of course, the hurricane hunters are going to keep flying into this system until it makes landfall. And they have had some pretty good winds there, up to 114 miles an hour. Notice the eye shape is circular on this system here. It is a little open on that southwest side, and that diameter of the eye is just under 40 miles right now. It is still a Category 3, 120-mile-an-hour winds. And if you just want to know that Saffir-Simpson scale, how we rate these hurricanes, Cat 3 starts at 111. It is forecast to be a Cat 2 once it nears the coast due to specifically, I think, a lot of the shear it's running into. There's also some cooler water temperatures. I think the shear is playing a little bit of a bigger role on this because it's already feeling some of that. Obviously, the hurricane can contain itself only to an extent, and then the shear takes over. But we have those advisories, hurricane warnings all the way up to Alexandria. And then, of course, that water rise. So even if you're to the east, like we were in, New Iberia, that area yesterday, even if we don't get the strongest winds there from the eye wall, you're still going to get that push of water, Vermilion Bay, and that's all going to shove into that whole community. So let's look at our forecast here. As we head into this evening, the forecast is showing that landfall, let's give it a range, will be, between 5, I'm going to say 5 and 9, to just give it a good range when it's coming in. But it will be this evening, and it does look like we will see winds at Category 2 strength when it comes in. And then, of course, it will continue inland with a lot of heavy rain. And, Jim, speaking of heavy rain, Baton Rouge getting crushed this morning with a combination of the tropical moisture, but also that little boundary that's kind of lingering, along the I-10 corridor about.
Yeah, so there's something, something that's at the edge of the cone or even outside of it in some cases where this band just set up and sat there. So that's the old front, Steph, that came through. Yeah. It's coming back to the north, and the moisture over the top of that is just absolutely hammering that area. So we have to watch out for a lot of these ancillary things, and of course that flooding being one of them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this. We've got an expanding wind field. All right, we know that's happening. We know the hurricane force winds are extending out as well from the center as are the tropical storm force winds. So all that is coming north. You can clearly see the circulation on the buoys. And what's great is because of the oil rigs and buoys out here, we can get a really nice data set as to exactly what's going on with this thing in terms of its size, in terms of, what some of these bands are doing as well as they move on through. So there, excuse me, there's the rain you see up around Baton Rouge. Winds are, it's not very windy. I mean, winds are to the north at 7, as I am here in Breaux Bridge. It is not very windy as well. But you get over to Lake Charles, you get a little bit closer to the coast, and certainly on the Texas coast, it gets a little windier there, gusts upward of 30 miles an hour or just more. There's the rain Steph was talking about with rainfall 5 to 8 inches north of Baton Rouge on over towards Centerville. Just incredible amounts of rain in through here, unfortunately, as a result of that band setting on up. So let's talk about where we go from here. We are on final approach, Jen. Last advisory again, finally due north. Eventually we see northeast as it makes its way toward the Louisiana coast for a landfall still expected to be early evening, if you will.
All right, Jim. Are folks boarded up there? There's sandbags. How have they prepared there in Breaux Bridge?
You know what? That's a great question, because I was just saying that to my photographer Brad Reynolds this morning and my buddy David Bernard. I said, I really don't see a lot of folks that have boarded up here in downtown. It's not a big downtown area. If you blink, you miss it. It's one of those, Jen. I do see some tape on the windows, which, as we know, really doesn't do much at all, and a couple of sandbags. But that is about it. This area typically does not flood. The bayou does come up a little bit, but otherwise, we don't usually see the downtown area flood from any kind of storm surge or anything like that. But either way, talking to a lot of folks from Breaux Bridge yesterday, they're definitely ready for this thing and ready to deal with it tonight and really be done. Really just be done with hurricane season altogether, as I'm sure many of us are.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that other area to watch out in the Atlantic. Thankfully, that's not something of concern right now. But yeah, people are just done with this hurricane season. And we need to talk about today. Today is landfall day. We are going to be seeing the winds ramp up, the rain ramp up, the surge as we get into the afternoon. I want to take you into the forecast and talk about that and the preparations. Grocery store shelves are quickly emptying yesterday across southern Louisiana. This was the scene at a store in Lafayette. People shop for bread, milk, the other essentials. This as Paris emergency officials warn people who plan to ride out the storm at home that emergency responders may not be able to help them after a certain point.
If people decide to stay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
Yeah, and so let's talk about those winds, the likelihood of that happening in Lafayette, other communities. Here's the path. Steph mentioned that time frame, 5 to 9 p.m. tonight. And we are expecting, it's Cat 3 right now. We are expecting that there'll be some weakening, but we're going to have a Cat 2 coming in, making landfall that will bring significant impacts here. We're expecting widespread power outages, and we are going to be watching for the rainfall, some of it heavy at times. Like you saw in Baton Rouge last night, if you get a band that sets up and you drop 5 to 9 inches of rain in just a couple of hours, that will cause flash flooding. Now, we mentioned this wind shear, and that is something that is going to help weaken the system. Thankfully, that's in place. It's also going to help steer it up to the northeast. It's moving north right now. It'll make that turn to the north and east. These water temperatures are cooler. You need water temperatures of 79 degrees, where it's about that up into that area. So it's sort of the minimum threshold for a hurricane. So what this means is we won't have a storm that's strengthening upon landfall, but can't say that we're going to have it weakening a lot. So we want to make sure that you're ready for the worst case scenario, which would be a strong Cat 2 coming in. Here we go, looking at your forecast here through the day. The rain bands coming in throughout the morning. Things are going downhill quickly across this area. So if you're not ready, I mean, if it's not raining right now, maybe you have a little bit of time, but honestly, this is the time to hunker down. This is the day to stay inside, be where you need to be for the day, and stay there through the duration of this event. You can see it does quickly move out. By tomorrow, tomorrow morning, you are dry along the Louisiana Gulf Coast in Lafayette and Lake Charles. You will see the system pulling up into northern parts of Louisiana and eventually on the way to Kentucky. Now, through Saturday morning in Lake Charles, we've got winds that are going to be tropical storm force here, pretty widespread. It is possible that we get into this hurricane force winds this evening, where the winds can be in excess of 90 miles per hour and 5 to 8 inches of rain. And this is tough news, right? Because just 6 weeks ago, Lake Charles, Louisiana was devastated by Hurricane Laura. And meteorologist Tevin Wooten joins us now live from a city still not recovered from that storm. And Tevin, paint the scene for us, the big piles of debris. What else are you seeing?
Well, Jen, it's very hard to imagine how you can go back to 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, a Category 4 hurricane by the name of Laura tore through Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is some of the damage it left behind. Trash bags still littering sidewalks and streets here. Cabinets, siding, portions of windows and roofs as well. This neighborhood we're in, just off of the interstate, known for its large trees that really just flourish throughout this neighborhood. But unfortunately, when you look back at Laura and what it did, those trees came down. Power lines came down as well. And now, the cleanup that's still been underway, it's very hard to look back and say, well, how is all of this still here? We spoke to the mayor right after Laura. He said about 90 to 95% of the city was damaged in some shape, form, or fashion. So essentially, you're talking about almost every single neighborhood. So they're still trying to clean up. But then the preparations for Delta, there really weren't any because you were in cleanup mode, and then evacuations. Those have been ongoing since about 2 days ago. Schools are, of course, closed here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. The interstate yesterday, jam-packed with folks trying to get out. Yes, folks were trying to go east, but quite frankly, a lot of people were trying to go west on I-210 and I-10 to get into Texas, Dallas, Houston, Galveston, anywhere far away from Delta. And now a cloud of disbelief shrouds Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is the second hurricane of the 2020 season to come through this area.
No way. There's just no way. It can't be possible.
With a city a sea of blue tarps after Hurricane Laura, Lake Charles Mayor Nick Hunter says safety first as Delta approaches.
All of those emotions about couldn't be, unprecedented, impossible, they are now completely aside at the moment. And we can worry about that later.
Lake Charles under an evacuation order, but some will stay.
We fared pretty good for Laura, and we don't have any fall damage stuff, so we're going to stay and make sure other people's places stay safe.
Traffic on I-10 thick as thousands flee.
They're having to evacuate again for this storm because their homes just can't withstand what's about to happen.
Bobby Kao boarding up. He's worried about people without solid protection over their heads.
Those that have been protected by the roof tarps are probably going to have problems again, and the tarps are going to come out.
Grocery store shelves thinning out. Shoppers like Neil Derwin snapping up generators. He, like thousands of others in Lake Charles, lost power for weeks after Laura.
We don't want to stay in a hotel for very long. We want to get the generator, get to the hotel, come back so we can stay at our house.
Laura's debris still lining streets. Trash that Delta could turn into dangerous projectiles.
It's bad for the Lake Charles because the situation is here is not good, All the roofs are gone and everything, So good luck for us,
To have one storm like Laura come through, that was enough. And now a second one on the way by the name of Delta. Just a lot of disbelief, a lot of shock and anxiety levels, and stress levels are high, and understandably so. But Steph, there is a glimmer or a sliver of good news here. It looks like the landfall will be to our east, nearby you, or perhaps further east than that. But the problem is the left side of the storm will still bring strong and damaging winds.
Yeah. No, you're not going to be able to escape this. And the problem is you don't need a lot of wind, right, to cause all of those problems. Let's talk about where the wind is the strongest right now, and that is over water. Remember that eye wall, and that has been actually going over buoys. And what you have to remember is when the pressure drops, the wind goes up. And so you see that as these storms go over buoys. So we want to show you one of these buoys, by the way, and notice that we do see that pressure drop right when the storm goes over. And by the way, I'm not sure if it's this exact buoy, but one of these buoys was reporting 28.5 feet waves. So remember, 10 feet is about the size of a building. So we're pushing nearly a 3-story building of waves. Can you even imagine? Try to picture that in your head. A wave the size is 3 stories of a building. Anyhow, this is big. And of course, that is all then going to propagate ahead of the storm. That is going to eat away at the shore. You're going to have that wave run up coming on, and we're going to see those winds coming in. Now, it does look like as we head around that 5, 6, 7 o'clock hour, things are really going to go downhill, especially when we get that landfall with those hurricane force winds right in that eye wall is where we'll see the worst wind damage. But off to the east, you will see that push of water. So eastern Louisiana, even Mississippi, expect to see that water rise here. And that max wind potential is, Lake Charles to Lafayette, right along that I-10 corridor from the coast, and then going up towards Alexandria is where we have the biggest potential for those strong winds. And that means that you have the biggest potential for those power outages. And, Jim, unfortunately, it's just part of dealing with a landfalling hurricane. There's really no way to escape it.
No, and I mean, we know this thing's already a major hurricane. It's Cat 3, and it's going to dampen down a little bit, but not enough, unfortunately, to just kind of lose all this stuff. All right, Steph, you already brought this up a little bit, so that's good. Let's talk more about the water, because that is obviously the #1 killer in hurricanes here, whether it be falling from the sky, flooding inland, or even the storm surge, which is going to come in. It's already starting to come up. But the buoy you mentioned, 4202 or 42002, is seen a maximum wave height of 33 feet. So yeah, 3 stories worth of water piling up out there. That has already gone by. All right, so now we're down to 19 feet. So all those waves are propagating north. And we're going to see water rise today and waves get bigger all along the Texas coast as well as the Florida coast. So really, remember, the waves propagate out westward as well. So that's why we have high surf warnings for waves of 10 to 14 feet in South Texas, including South Padre Island. So here comes the surge. Again, it'll be maximized at landfall on the right side. That's where we'll get the 7 to 11 feet that is forecast, depending on when we come in versus the tide. But notice again what we're looking at here, a surge component that goes all the way to the Florida Panhandle. So there will be a water rise there. It'll be smaller and it won't be as sudden, but certainly a surge is a surge on an area that's just been beaten down. No question about it here, guys, as we continue to watch this very dangerous hurricane make its way to the North Delta on approach for a landfall coming up early this evening. So that is what we're looking at here in terms of the storm surge. We will continue to update you on all of the action here as we get new advisories. Of course, the radar will eventually close in on the system coming in as well.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Some brave men and women have been taking off and staring right into the eye of Hurricane Delta. This is video from the Air Force Hurricane Hunters of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. And on one mission last night over the Gulf of Mexico, they actually crossed into the eye of the storm at the same time as NOAA's Hurricane Hunter aircraft, so they could see the other aircraft. This has happened before, but the Hurricane Hunter who posted this said, never have they had such a great visibility of the other aircraft out there at the same time. What a sight. All right, here, certainly we're so grateful for the information and data that they provide, helping make better forecasts. Let's go ahead and take a look at that forecast actually right now. When it comes to travel today, we've already had some travel issues because of the heavy rain around Baton Rouge. Thankfully, the rain is now out of the picture. The flash flood warning was allowed to expire, but there was some high water at the entrance ramp to 110 at the Scenic Highway there in Baton Rouge. And that's the kind of situation that could happen again. We still have a lot of rainfall lifting north into southwestern Mississippi, into northern Louisiana, and that's well ahead of where we're going to get the biggest rainfall directly from Hurricane Delta. So watching out for that risk of rain, there is that risk for severe weather with these isolated tornado spin-ups. They usually happen very fast and you don't often get a lot of warning. So just be ready. Have a way to get your warning, something that will alert you here near you all day today. There's a 3 on the Torcon, and I will continue that into tonight as well. Rain will be spreading in throughout the day. For folks who are thinking of traveling or that have to be out on the roadways, a lot of businesses are closed or schools are certainly closed in the area. Certainly this morning is it, because by lunchtime we're inundated with the heavy rainfall, and this is a big hazard when it comes to tropical systems. We talk about the wind, we talk about the surge, but you know what? There's another risk, and that's people driving when there is rain like this and wind like this. So stay off the roads as we get into this evening. In fact, in Lafayette, I saw that your curfew is now going into effect at 4 o'clock this evening. So anything that you need to do on the roadways, you need to do early today. All right, let's talk more about Delta and the fact that it was strengthening yesterday. And meteorologist Stephanie Abrams, of course, monitoring this from Jennings. Steph, let's talk about that, because we saw the eye again with the storm. We certainly saw it take more of a classic shape. And thankfully, that trend, it looks like, is starting to abate.
Right, because of the wind shear. And we'll talk about how the wind shear actually affects these hurricanes. But first, do you know that we've had 4 hurricanes make landfall in the continental U.S. so far this year? The last time we had 5, which we'll get with this system, was back in 2005. This year, we've had Isaias, Hannah, Laura, and Sally, which all, by the way, intensified right before landfall, and those wind speeds increased anywhere from 10 to 25 miles per hour in just the 12 hours prior to landfall. The good news is that is not the forecast with Delta. What we're thinking with Delta is that our pressure is going to rise and those wind speeds are going to drop. Remember, when the pressure falls, that's when the wind speeds increase. When the pressure rises, the wind is going to let up. So one of the reasons is the water temperature is going into cooler water. I think the bigger reason is because of that shear, which is, by the way, already affecting a little bit right now, and that will continue to affect it as it moves closer to the U.S. coast. Let's bring in Jim and Tevin to talk more about Delta. And Jim, I'm going to start off with you, because a lot of people obsess over Cat 2 versus Cat 3. And just so everyone knows, on the Saffir-Simpson scale, how we rate hurricanes, Cat 2 goes to 110. Cat 3 is technically 111, but you also have to remember the Hurricane Center only does everything in 5-mile-per-hour increments. And so if you have winds at 100, 110 versus 11, 12, which is Cat 3, you're still going to get significant damage. But a lot of people obsess over that number.
Yeah, they do. And first of all, the whole takeaway from this is it isn't just a number or a category. It's not an equal distribution, okay? It's an exponential relationship with the wind and the power of the wind to structures. So it goes up exponentially. There is a big difference between a Cat 2 and a Cat 1. But to Steph's point, if you're on the lower end of the Cat 2 or on the upper end of the Cat 1, there's not that much of a difference, okay? So where we are now with a 120-mile-an-hour hurricane, with this forecast to be a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane, yes, that's a big difference, okay? Especially one that is weakening. You also have to watch the trend of what's coming on shore. Steph mentioned everything else was increasing in intensity, so that keeps the wind energy up. It actually amps up the potential for power outages, but this has enough. And certainly, with a hurricane force wind field that extends out 40 miles on each side, you're talking about something that certainly could do a lot of wind damage. And we've already lost so much timber because of Laura in the state of Louisiana. So this is the last thing we need. This is going to once again lay down the sugar cane down where we are. The good news is, unlike corn, as I learned yesterday, sugarcane can actually be brought back up and harvested again. Corn cannot. But again, let's talk a little bit, Steph, about the storm surge, because you and I talked about this on the air the other day, how once you create those waves, and we're dealing with a major hurricane right now, they don't just go away, even though the storm weakens with a pressure rise and a wind down.
Yeah, and Tevin, I want to talk to you about that as well, because all of that is going to be east of the storm, the biggest surge. All right, I don't think Tevin could hear me. We'll be back more with Hurricane Delta.
Moly. When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
And with footage this insane,
Wow.
Here comes the snow, and there goes New York City.
there's no telling what they'll say next.
Nope, 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 all the way back home. Oh, it doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel.
Traffic on Interstate 10 crawling out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and away from the path of dangerous Delta. Cruelly, 2020 is sending a second hurricane hurtling toward the city of some 80,000 people. Landfall expected. Looks like Papsley just to the east of Lake Charles around dinner time this evening. And we want to show you this monster that is headed towards the coast, the satellite imagery showing just how big this is over the Gulf of Mexico, and it will arrive on the Louisiana coast just 43 days after Category 4 Hurricane Laura. It looks like this one will be making landfall as a Category 2. Welcome back into AMHQ. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams live in Jennings, Louisiana. We are watching and waiting as Delta will become the 5th hurricane to make landfall in the United States, and that hasn't happened since the notorious 2005 hurricane season that, of course, gave us Katrina and Rita, just to name a few. Let's give you the very latest of what we know this morning. Nearly 6 million people are under some sort of tropical alert this morning. Mandatory evacuations for all or parts of Allen, Calcasieu, Cameron, St. Mary, and Vermilion parishes. 91% of Gulf oil production has been halted, with crews pulled off 272 Gulf platforms, and the Alabama-Ole Miss kickoff pushed back until 6:30 Central Time on Saturday in Oxford, Mississippi. So let's give you the very latest if you're just waking up and joining us. Again, that satellite picture where you see, just so you know what you're looking at when you look at one of these, where you have those higher cloud tops, you get that more purple color. And then where you have the lower cloud tops, you get the, you know, some of those blues and those yellows. And if you have a higher cloud top, then you're going to have taller thunderstorms. And so that's an indication you have big, tall thunderstorms. Now, it is starting to show up on radar. I should say the eye wall and the eye is starting to show up on radar. And so that is going to continue to swirl towards us. And, you know, that is where you have the worst weather. Right where you see that ring rotating is the worst weather. Again, it's a Cat 3 at 120 miles an hour. At landfall, it's going to be dropping down to Cat 2 because it's encountering some shear. And hurricanes like to stand upright. They don't like to be knocked over to the side. Just like humans, they like to have very good posture. And of course, we have all the advisories posted from Texas over to Mississippi. And one of the things you have to watch out is for that water rise. And listen, if you live along the Mississippi coast, even Florida and Texas coast, you're going to see it come up a little bit. It's not going to be, you know, deadly and damaging, but certainly you could see erosion. There's rip currents, and these areas have just been hit so many times. That's something else you have to think about, is how they've been eaten away all season long. And, you know, Jim, it is remarkable that this year has really been the Gulf Coast when it's come to hurricanes, thanks to the steering pattern in the atmosphere overall. You know, ridges just pushing everything right into the Gulf of Mexico.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, Steph, we've seen that, right? We've seen patterns sometimes set up. Yeah. This will tie Louisiana's record for a 4th landfall like they had back in 2002. Yes. OK. If you remember 2004, Florida. That's where the pattern set up for Florida. And guys, back on the radar that Steph just showed you, I want to bring this up before I get to my part of the segment here, because I just think this is way cool. And Steph, you probably know about this too, but the mobile radar from the University of Oklahoma's Cooperative Institute for Mesoscale Meteorology, essentially the OU mobile Doppler radar, is actually being sent to replace the radar that was damaged in Lake Charles. So that we're going to have essentially continuous data, and we're not going to have a void there, because if you remember, you know, as we get closer to landfall, you want that radar data. You want to see the banding. You want to see the kind of features that are coming into us to warn for possible tornadoes and heavy rainfall and things like that. So that mobile Doppler radar is going to take the place of the actual radar, which was damaged in Lake Charles. And I just thought that was incredibly cool. So guys, again, I'm in downtown Breaux Bridge here, and you can see that, you know, we don't really have a lot of buildings that are boarded up. I see tape here. I see, you know, some sandbags certainly out over toward the door, and that's the case with a couple of these buildings. But, you know, they're expecting a similar setup, if you will, to what they had with Laura. So even though it's closer, it's weaker. And there's not a lot of taped up even heading out toward the major interstate, which is Interstate 10 here. So let's talk about Lake Charles, because this thing, again, is going to start producing more and more rain and wind as we go on through the day today. Could total about 5 to 8 inches. What we're all worried about, and we've been highlighting for a couple of days now, is the tremendous amount of tarps that are on roofs. And you don't need a hurricane force gust to rip off one of those tarps. And some folks have started projects inside their house with that tarp because they can't get a roofer. And so those projects are definitely threatened by that. So there's the core of the rain going up through Alexandria and up through north central Louisiana. It will lay down the sugarcane once again, but the radar, I think, gives us a little hint at what's going to be coming ashore here. This is not a well-defined, the eye is going to be breaking up a little bit as it's coming ashore here. So the radar's trying to tell us that the cooler water temperatures and the atmospherics, like the shear and the dry air getting into this, are going to start to really mess up that eye wall structure here, which is great news. Here, Lafayette, Breaux Bridge, 3 to 5 inches. Winds certainly gusting to hurricane force in through early this evening. AMHQ will be right back.
Okay, come to your TV screens, your computer screens, or maybe even your cell phone screens. You have to see this video. These are rough seas washing ashore in Galveston yesterday evening. The Gulf of Mexico being stirred up as Hurricane Delta moved north towards the Louisiana coast. Galveston can expect to see a storm surge ranging from 1 to 3 feet later on today. And here's what you have to keep in mind. Even though Galveston is not in the direct path of Hurricane Delta, it will still see impacts like what we're seeing right there. Welcome back to the show. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten. We're live in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We are expecting a brutal beating from Delta later on today and into the evening hours. Let's talk about your travel forecast, though. There are still people evacuating and getting out of harm's way. The forecast today is certainly not the best for that. If you do it sooner this morning, it's much better than later on today. We've got flash flood watches posted between here in Lake Charles all the way eastbound into Baton Rouge and in Tiger territory and eventually into northeastern Louisiana. So we're talking about areas along I-20 and Monroe. You look at the radar right now, yes, there's moderate to heavy rainfall at this hour. Jackson, Mississippi, Yazoo City, Greenville, Mississippi, into portions of southeastern Arkansas and stretching all the way along I-55 into northern Mississippi. But it's what's approaching from the south later on today that will lead to that threat of damaging and devastating winds. And of course, the tornado threat too, that's on the eastern side of the storm where we can see 1 or 2 spin-ups and water spouts as well. Of course, that forecast right there, the conditions do deteriorate, and certainly later on today, we'll have to watch out for the chance of that storm surge threat. Robert Ray in Lake Charles, Louisiana, going about the city as folks prepare for this storm. Take a look at this report that he filed.
Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped apart the home of Deborah and Jerome Lestraps.
It's very draining, and to have to pack up and leave again, you know, that's a little stressful.
That's the bedroom area here.
Wind and water damage from that storm are forcing them to gut their home. Now they're worried again. What will Delta do?
Had to leave.
This is our home away from home, camping in our backyard.
The Lestraps have been living in this mobile trailer for 6 weeks. Jerome plans to ride out Hurricane Delta in their home that's being rebuilt, while Deborah is evacuating with her elderly mother.
Here I have an air mattress or a cot, and that's where I'm going to live here until all of this is over with.
So you're going to hunker down during Delta inside here?
Yes.
And why is that? Why aren't you leaving?
Because I want to be home to make sure that our home is okay, and you're not going to have looters that's going to be trying to get into your home and take what you have or make matters worse.
About 15 miles away in Iowa, Louisiana, the Becknells are in a similar situation, repairing the roof and getting ready to evacuate again.
It is like a dream, and you want to wake up, and it's not going to be here. You know, it's not going to be true, but it is. Sorry.
No, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's very, very emotional. Very. But you got to keep going, and you got to say, it'll be okay. You know, it's going to be fine, and it will be. We're strong people.
For 35 years, this has been home. The Becknells raised their kids here. Across the street, the broken trees from their yard are piled up. The neighbors, a few doors down, have set up a makeshift kitchen on the front lawn because their home isn't structurally safe. The last thing this block needs is another hurricane.
I believe that the Lord's going to protect us, and we'll have a home. Anyway.
What would you compare this to in your life? Anything else?
No, nothing. You just can't let yourself get down. It's easy to get down, but you have to stay strong.
Because that's what families here do during hurricane season. Stay Louisiana strong. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
A rough go for the folks here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, preparing for their second hurricane of the season. That was Robert Ray reporting. Let's go now to Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. That is where we find our Jim Cantore. And Jim, for folks up and down our east and west along I-10, at the very least, prepare for heavy rainfall today.
Yeah, I mean, we've already had some, amazingly, about 5 to 9 inches from Baton Rouge on northward. We got flash flood warnings out there. So where do we set up the rainfall as we get into tonight? Now, what's interesting is we're actually getting a little help from a front. The same front that came and brought the cool air last week here is slowly started to move back to the north. And unfortunately, sometimes they get stuck because the rain falls through that air and kind of locks it in. But it's going to break up and dissolve as we go on in time. But this will bring, certainly with the eye and the dynamics of the hurricane, heavy rain threat up through Louisiana, including Lake Charles. So once we get the wind, it's kind of awful when you think about it, Tevin, because we'll get the wind and the rain almost at the same time. We'll lose the tarps on some of these buildings, unfortunately, and then the rain will get in to further cause damage in through there. So you'll have kind of a dual insurance threat. But by 7 p.m., again, this thing's coming close to shore with its heavy rain, from pretty much where our live shot locations are. Calcasieu Parish, Jefferson Davis Parish, over here in St. Martin Parish where we are, and then it moves on to the north. Some of that dry air gets in it, so that rain footprint, at least the heaviest rain, will probably stop before it gets on up toward Memphis. But Houston, about an inch for you. Lake Charles, anywhere from 5 to 8. And as you can see, we are spread out to cover this storm for you before, during, and afterward with several teams, including even after it moves inland. You can see Chris Warren up there in toward the Alexandria area. Much more to come. Delta, 10th landfall of this incredible 2020 season.
A woman weather is heading your way.
We've already got some rain out there this morning and severe storms developing.
America's Morning Headquarters has you covered. So start every day with the best in weather.
Time now to check out the tropics for you. We're focused in here on the western Atlantic.
AMHQ.
Welcome back into AMHQ, your morning headquarters for weather.
Join Jim Cantore, Stephanie Abrams, and Jen Carfagno. Weekday mornings on the Weather Channel.
It is landfall day of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams. This will be the 10th named system to make landfall this season. We have never had that in history. The old record was 9 back in 1916, I will say. This area is ready for this storm. We're on Main Street, and you see that these businesses are boarded up, and really a lot of places around town are boarded up, and they did get hit pretty hard here with Laura. A lot of blue tarps on roofs we saw driving around, and this here, we don't have boards on this business, but they do have sandbags, and the doors are taped up. A lot of places, the gas stations were running out of gas and or just straight out of gas yesterday when we were trying to fill up our gas tanks. So people are taking this seriously. We could potentially take a direct hit here with that northern eye wall in particular. Weather, and we will be live, obviously, through the duration of this storm. Let's talk about those winds. You can see it's a little bit breezy this morning. It's not too bad, but obviously it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better here. Rain has yet to come in, but that wind will continue to pick up and pick up and pick up as we head throughout the day. And we could see some of those, gusting 50, 60. And if you're in that eye wall, and this is a Category 2, you could see wind gusts much higher than that. Now, remember, a high-end Category 2 goes up to 110 miles an hour. Cat 3 starts at 111. Right now, the forecast is to have this around 100 miles an hour at landfall. And where we have the winds spreading out also all the way over into places like Mississippi, I wouldn't rule out some of you in Mississippi losing power. All right, especially where it noses into Louisiana. So do keep that in mind. Power outages are going to be very likely where you have those core winds. And then even far outside that, we've seen places way inland that lose power because you start to see all those trees come down as well. Remember, it's been very wet here throughout the south. And so you're going to get more rain on top of that. Some places could say 6, 8, maybe 12 inches of rain when all is said and done with this. But it's not only the rain, it's not only the wind. Jen, I think that surge is such a huge component with this, especially with those people not feeling the strongest winds, but that water rising up. And you can't really go far when the water starts to come up.
Well, exactly. And this is an area that's very prone to surge because of how low-lying it is here. We're, not much above sea level, if at sea level. And Steph, where you were yesterday in Delcombe, we're expecting some of the biggest surge there. So I want to hone in on some of the details. There are these great surge inundation maps that show you where and with so much detail how high the water is going to get. So let me give you the lay of the land here. We're going to go south of 90 to where we're going to see some of the biggest water rise from surge. And I'll take you into these details here where you can see, over where Steph was yesterday, New Iberia, southward over towards Delcombe, anywhere that you see in the orange, that's 6 to 9 feet, in the red, that is 9 feet plus. Once you get above 6 feet, that water is in the first floor of your home, right? It's moving everything around. It's soaking your carpets, your furniture. It has a lot of force too, so it's moving things. Your car could be floating in water like that. So the big impacts from that 6+ surge. And then let's talk about the waves too. This buoy we've been following, 42002, it actually had waves of 35 feet earlier in the overnight here. The system has moved north. Delta is north of it now, so the waves have come down a little bit. But that's the level of, sort of wave action that we're seeing well offshore. The water rise and the surge that we're seeing already, even with the flow that's from the east or northeast, is up above a foot. Galveston, we're actually running above 2 feet right now, and that is only going to increase through today. Really watching this evening's high tide cycle for some of the biggest impacts. There are coastal flood advisories, even in Galveston Bay, you've got that coastal flood warning there. And then a high surf warning down here in Texas. This is the first high surf warning that the Weather Service in Brownsville has issued since 2013. That was for Hurricane Ingrid, which was sitting right offshore. But that gives you a sense of the magnitude of the waves that are being generated. They're expecting 10 to 14-foot waves here today. So the waves along all of the coastline are going to be an issue. Red flag or even double red flag along the beaches all the way to the Florida Panhandle. Storm surge warning is up here in coastal Louisiana. 7 to 11 feet is what we're expecting the peak storm surge to be, and that will be life-threatening. Think about 11 feet of storm surge, well over anyone's head. That's forcing you to get to the second floor of your home, and that kind of surge is the reason why most of the evacuations have been ordered. Let's go back out to meteorologist Tevin Wooten, who joins us now live from Lake Charles. And Tevin, there it's a little bit of a different story. Some people are leaving because they know that the wind will wreak havoc on the damage already caused by Laura.
Yeah, Jen, the infrastructure here is so fragile, so at this point it's perhaps not safe to even electricity for any sort of medical devices or beyond that. Speaking of beyond that, what happens to Delta once it moves inland? We know we don't have the storm surge threat well inland into North Louisiana, but we do have the threat of very heavy rainfall as Delta moves inland. So here's a look at the flash flood threat from Friday all the way into Saturday. And look at this: Greenville, Memphis, Tennessee, Tupelo, Oxford, Middle Tennessee as well. This is as Delta is taking
Difficulties out there in the field, but I'll take it over. I'll take it over, Tevin, and track Delta inland. Now, it'll be weakening in terms of wind, but the rain, the footprint will still be there, moving into Mississippi, into Tennessee. Yes, Memphis, Nashville. Again, you're going to get another batch of tropical moisture coming in. And the rainfall will be heaviest in Louisiana. That's where we have widespread 5 to 8 inches of rainfall. But we're going to get a decent amount of rain heading into portions of Tennessee, some of it getting up to Kentucky as well. And the winds, we could see tropical storm force winds. Greenville, Mississippi, one of the spots we're watching. We will keep an eye on Memphis as well. Another way to get our coverage, you can check out our coverage on Sirius XM digital channel 721 straight through Saturday.
Introducing Tostito.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel.
This morning, powerful Hurricane Delta is making a beeline for the U.S. Gulf Coast, and the storm-weary state of Louisiana is bracing for impact. The major Category 3 hurricane will lash the coast with heavy rain, gusty winds, and potentially life-threatening surge. Nearly 6 million people are under tropical alerts from Mississippi to Texas, including the city of Lake Charles, which was devastated by Hurricane Laura over a month ago. We have around-the-clock coverage here on the Weather Channel, and of course here on AMHQ, a team of meteorologists that are spread out. Tevin Wooten is in Lake Charles, which is just off to my west. Jim Cantori is off to my east in Beaubridge, Louisiana, and Jen Carfagno is joining us live from the Weather Channel headquarters this morning. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams in Jennings, Louisiana, and we want to get you up to date on the very latest on this incredible 10th tropical cyclone to hit the U.S. in this history-making 2020 season. The last time that we have seen 9 storms hit was 1916. So this is going to break that record, which is just incredible. Have a look at the traffic on I-10 yesterday, bumper to bumper out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. The city of some 80,000 residents wounded, of course, by Category 4 Laura just 43 days ago, and now limping with piles of debris. Wait till you see what Tevin Wooten's going to show us. And you don't need a landfall in order to cause problems. Even just the, outskirt winds could cause some problems there. Let's talk about the hurricane hunters. They are flying. We have 2 planes in there. We have the Air Force Reserves. We also have the NOAA Hurricane Hunters taking off from Florida. You can see that on the right-hand side of your screen, making their way towards the system there. And of course, they fly high, they fly low, they get a lot of data, and that can help us with the forecast. Right now, winds at 120 miles an hour. That makes it a Category 3. Cat 3 starts at 111 mile-per-hour winds, moving north-northwest at 12 miles an hour. Still has that westerly component to it. With that said, there are advisories posted anywhere from Beaumont, Lake Charles, Alexandria, Lafayette, over to Morgan City with that hurricane warning. And then, of course, it's not only the winds, because that will be in a small area right around the eye wall. That's where we will see the most significant structural damage, is where that eye wall hits. But the surge encompasses a whole lot more. I mean, you're talking over to Mississippi. Even Florida will see a little water rise. Nothing you have to do, but you need to stay out of the water, stay off the beaches, because this area has been so battered. All the natural, defense mechanisms that we have been worn down. But in Vermilion Bay, over where we were yesterday, that New Iberia, Dalcombe, Louisiana, that's where we anticipate that water to come up on the east side of the storm. Landfall looks like it'll be around the 7 o'clock hour, give or take a little bit here, right? You have to give or take a couple hours with that. Around 100-mile-an-hour winds. That would be Category 2 at landfall, and then it continues inland. There's a lot of heavy rain with this system, especially on the northwest side of it right now. And even away from the hurricane's rain, Jim, I want to talk about all the rain that we're already getting. There's tropical moisture, but there's also a little boundary sitting around that I-10 corridor, and that's just enough to really squeeze out this tropical moisture out of the atmosphere. It's incredible what's been happening.
That's exactly right. So here you got this hurricane and you've got this boundary which is set up to our north. And this, by the way, is the same cold front that went all the way down to the Yucatan and has now come back to the north as a warm front and what is now a stationary boundary. And it's being rain-cooled and reinforced. But that, unfortunately, is setting the stage for heavy rain. We had that last night in Baton Rouge. So we want to talk about that certainly in a little bit and how that's going to play a role as we go through the afternoon and the evening. First of all, what kind of an animal do we have here? Steph mentioned Cat 3, 120 miles an hour. The hurricane hunters, of course, are out there. It's going to be really interesting to see what this pressure does. Are we going to stay at 953? We're going to go a little lower. We're going to start going up a little bit with the pressure. That's impossible, too. But here's the current wind field, 40 miles out from the center. So that's an 80-mile diameter hurricane force wind field. And, of course, 320 miles from west to east when you look at the tropical storm force winds. And a lot of buoys, a lot of ships out here, or not ships, oil rigs out and through here that we can get measurements from. I just saw Jeff Lindner tweet one that was out in pretty much right near this eye wall that's got 85-mile-per-hour winds and about 160 feet up. So, we can really get an idea what's going on here. Plus, the mobile Doppler radar is being put in place in Lake Charles to basically fill that void, because if you remember, Laura took out the radar there. So now they put that mobile Doppler radar there to kind of fill the void, which was huge. And obviously with this thing coming in close, you need to see these little features that are going on for tornadoes, for heavy rain, for high winds. Okay, where are the high winds with the banding? And that mobile Doppler radar is going to do that. So again, rainfall has been very heavy overnight. Baton Rouge on up to Centerville. That's just north of that front. So low-level winds coming over that front, being lifted almost in the same spot there. And again, a lot of this area is not.
I mean, the grocery shelves are just cleared out across southern Louisiana. This was the scene at a store in Lafayette as people shop for bread, milk, and other essentials. This as Paris emergency officials warn people who plan to ride out the storm at home that emergency responders may not be able to help them after a certain point.
If people decide to stay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
All right, so let's look at that forecast with that wind. We are anticipating here at landfall, again, a Cat 2. While it's weakening as it moves inland somewhat, we're still looking by Saturday morning to have that potential for strong tropical storm force winds at 70 miles per hour. That's going to prevent those emergency vehicles from being able to get out even as the storm moves inland. Now, what is going to knock down the winds a bit from where it is right now at 120 miles per hour? The wind shear is going to be one of the big factors. It's already feeling some of that. Another factor is that we do have these cooler sea surface temperatures, lower ocean heat content right here along the coastline. That happens in October. It happened especially because that front came through, the same front that is actually causing some of that rain or helping to squeeze out that tropical moisture this morning. And so that's some good news. But look at how this all plays out through the day. The rain comes in, the wind starts to ramp up. We are in tropical storm force conditions this morning. And by lunchtime, that rain is spreading right over the entire I-10 corridor here in southern Louisiana. The rain is heavy at times. It's tropical downpours that we're dealing with. We just saw that 5 to 9 inches of rain around the Baton Rouge area, and that's the kind of situation we could get into. We could get some of these rainfall rates up over an inch or two per hour easily. It adds up to that. And then overnight, we see the rain shifting north, moving into Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and it is weakening quite a bit actually as it moves inland, because now we've got land interaction along with the shear and even some dry air that's going to start working in. But in Lake Charles, let's talk about your forecast here. We are going to see tropical storm force winds that's ramping up today. That's continuing through tomorrow morning. There is that potential for hurricane force winds at 90 mile per hour gusts coming in this evening, and the rainfall could be 5 to 8 inches of rain. And remember, just 6 weeks ago, Lake Charles, Louisiana was devastated by Hurricane Laura. And meteorologist Tevin Wooten is there live this morning from a city that is not fully recovered. Tevin, what's the situation on power there? Has power been restored everywhere yet?
Jen, I think that's perhaps one of the most unfortunate parts here. Power has been restored to a lot of Lake Charles, Louisiana. We were actually here about 2 weeks ago during Tropical Storm Beta when we spoke to the mayor. They did have power, but now the thing is the infrastructure is still so fragile. So when you have a second hurricane coming through, that might just snap some of those power poles and bring down trees yet again, or whatever is left still standing. As you can see right beyond me here, we've got piles of debris, trash bags, yes, but still fresh debris brought out of several neighborhood homes here. Cabinets, drawers, siding, windows, everything, you name it, completely gutted out of this home. In fact, look at the roof of this home right here. See that? It's pitched. That's not the case. That wasn't the case as Laura came through just about 6 weeks ago. The roof was actually flat. A neighbor says that this home, or that roof rather, got picked up and tossed to the other side of the street and impacted a nearby neighbor's home. And then just beyond me, of course, this is very telling, not just in this neighborhood, but several neighborhoods all across Lake Charles. The substantial tree damage that we saw in the immediate aftermath of Laura, it was great. And unfortunately, we have to get ready for another storm by the name of Delta. A sense of disbelief shrouds Lake Charles and surrounding communities as the second hurricane of the 2020 season looms on.
No way. There's just no way. It can't be possible.
With a city a sea of blue tarps after Hurricane Laura, Lake Charles Mayor Nick Hunter says safety first as Delta approaches.
All of those emotions about couldn't be, unprecedented, impossible, they are now completely aside at the moment, and we can worry about that later.
Lake Charles under an evacuation order, but some will stay.
We fared pretty good for Laura, and we don't have any fall damage stuff, so we're going to stay and make sure other people's places stay safe.
Traffic on I-10 thick as thousands flee.
They're having to evacuate again for this storm because their homes just can't withstand what's about to happen.
Bobby Kao boarding up. He's worried about people without solid protection over their heads.
Those that have been protected by the roof tarps are probably going to have problems again, and the tarps are going to come out.
Grocery store shelves thinning out. Shoppers like Neil Derwin snapping up generators. He, like thousands of others in Lake Charles, lost power for weeks after Laura.
We don't want to stay in a hotel for very long. We want to get the generator, get to the hotel, come back so we can stay at our house.
Laura's debris still lining streets. Trash that Delta could turn into dangerous projectiles.
It's bad for the Lake Charles because the situation is here is not good, you know. All the roofs are gone and everything, you know. So good luck for us, you know.
Of course, we are concerned about the damaging wind threat here. We're anticipating at least Category 1 force winds, so anywhere between 74 miles an hour and beyond. But I want to bring in Steph now. Steph, you're in Jennings, Louisiana, just 2 hours east. Despite the fact if we get that eye wall or not, we're still in for devastation here yet again in Lake Charles.
I mean, even just a thunderstorm, an afternoon thunderstorm, Tevin, could cause problems for people there with their blue tarps. Let's talk about the wind with this system, because Delta went right over a buoy. And you know how we can tell? Pressure dropped and the winds dropped. This is just so cool to see, because what are the chances a hurricane goes right over a buoy? Now, remember this, when the pressure is dropping, the winds are going to be going up, okay? They have an inverse relationship. Until you get to the dead center of the system, the pressure is going to be the lowest and the winds are completely calm. And then you'll see it go away from that buoy and you'll see everything go back up. But, I mean, you can see this buoy. It just is really cool to see. The blue lines of pressure drops, and right when it's dropping, you see that wind really going up. And then, of course, at that lowest point means you have the calm of the eye with the lowest pressure. Anyhow, someone will see the eye of the system when it makes landfall. And you don't want to ever get fooled by that, because you go through that first eye wall with those strong winds coming in. You get that calm, and then you're going to get the back end of the storm. Now, that back end of the storm looks like it'll be a little ragged when it comes ashore, but you'll still get it, and it doesn't take a lot to move around the debris that's already been loosened. So we're going to watch for those winds to be coming in, not only at the coast, but as this whole system moves in. It takes a minute for them to wind down, and it's not only the wind, but the rain that we are going to have to deal with. And, of course, that means that we are going to see widespread power outages. And I really want to emphasize, I've seen so many times where everyone at the coast gets ready for those power outages, but then inland, people think, well, I'm fine because I'm inland. And yes, relatively speaking. But I even remember with Sally, I was trying to get up to I-10. I saw trees down and power out. I want to say nearly to I-10, if not all the way to I-10. That's how far inland it went. Jim, I don't know if you had that experience too when driving back. I know obviously you've experienced enough to verify that type of information. But I mean, the power outages, you got to know where your flashlights are, you know, and all the things you need to prepare for having no power.
Absolutely. And if you remember with Sally too, Steph, it was intensifying upon landfall. So it takes a lot longer to wind that thing down. And that does typically bring your power outage footprint in much farther. So, you know, that's just one of the things we're looking at. This may be a little bit different, but we'll see. They're all different. I've done 105 of these. I can promise you that. Let's talk about these buoys again, because Steph brought up a good point. It's great to have that other data point that's pretty much just sitting right out there in the Gulf of Mexico. You can not only see what the temperature is, you can not only see what the dew point is, what the pressure is, but also the wave height. And you can see the timing between the waves. It really has an amazing amount of data. That's why the maintenance of these buoys is incredibly critical now and in our future. But it just happened to show you when the maximum wave set of high water came through this buoy. And we maxed out at a height of 33 feet. At this buoy, and now of course it's come on down. So what this kind of shows us, and there's a lot of physics that go into, you know, figuring out what a wind envelope does to the waves, but this wave action is now coming toward the coast, and we're seeing the water continuing to rise. Now, interestingly enough, high surf warning out for waves in South Texas. Wait a minute, the storm's moving toward Louisiana. But remember, the waves propagate out west, south, and north, obviously. North is going to be the maximum wave height, but either way, you're going to get big waves on South Padre Island, and of course the surge already coming up. Our continuing coverage of Delta as we scatter everyone across Louisiana here. Approach tonight, early evening. Get ready.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Roads across the Gulf Coast will get more difficult to use as Delta gets closer to landfall. That's why you've seen the mass exodus taking place for people along I-10 to get to safety. Look at all those cars lined up, one side of the highway packed, trying to get out of Beaumont, Texas yesterday. And this is why evacuation orders have to be issued so far in advance of a storm's arrival. You've got to plan for the crowds, you got to plan for the traffic, got to leave time to get everyone off the road before the weather gets bad. And it's already starting, actually, already getting some rainfall out there. And I do want to look at the travel conditions for you. Let's get into Louisiana. Baton Rouge overnight, hard hit with heavy rain. We had a cell that just sat here 5 to 9 inches of rainfall. There was some high water on the entrance ramp to 110 near the Scenic Highway there in Baton Rouge. Thankfully, that's lifted out. We're seeing improving conditions right there. But look, that was because of front and the tropical moisture in the area. The big push of Delta's rain is just starting to come in, and you can see it from Lake Charles all the way to Houston. So Houston will get some impacts out of this as well. I-10 travel today, get ready. It's not going to get any better than what you have right now. I know there's some dry times around New Orleans and over towards Biloxi, but we will get into these rain bands throughout the day. There is that isolated risk of severe weather, tornadoes, the main threat, and there is a 3 on the Torcon for today. All right, so let's look at the timing of everything. This morning, obviously, the roads are wet from Houston to Lake Charles. As we get through the afternoon, going downhill very quickly, we will be watching Baton Rouge back into the heavy rain by this evening. Now, everything's saturated, right, because of that rain that we had overnight. So this is lunchtime, a mess on the roads. In fact, I did see in Lafayette, 4 o'clock, your curfew is in effect starting at 4 o'clock. That's, about the timing of when we really get into some of the heaviest of bands, expecting landfall sometime between about 5 to 9 tonight, coming in, crossing over I-10, heading to the north, taking the heaviest of rain, pushing with it as we get into the overnight. Let's go back out to meteorologist Stephanie Abrams here in Jennings, Louisiana. And Steph, I just learned of another superlative for Delta and this 2020 hurricane season. So when Delta achieved its criteria as another major hurricane as 120 mile per hour winds, the strongest so far north and west where it's located for this late in the season, it tied that with 1886.
The list, Jen, it goes on. It's like a CVS receipt. It just doesn't stop, the amount of superlatives that we've had here. And it will, by the way, we'll add another one to that when this makes landfall because, we have never had 10 tropical systems make landfall in one season. We've had 9 in 1916. That's a record. Now we're talking about 10. So let's talk about the 4 hurricanes that have made landfall this year: Isaias, Hannah, Laura, and Sally. And by the way, they were all intensifying while they were making landfall. They had wind speeds increasing anywhere from 10 to 25 miles per hour in the 12 hours before they hit land. That will not be the case for Delta. It's going to be falling apart for 2 reasons. First of all, the water temperatures, they're getting a little bit cooler. It's still warm enough, but it's not that deep, deep, warm, and I'm talking about literally deep, warm water that we've had earlier in the season. The other big factor, I think, that's going to play a role is that shear, and it's already starting to, feel the effects of that. And so that's what will help take it down to a Category 2 upon landfall. Let's talk more about Delta with Jim and Tevin. I want to bring them in. And Jim, we're going to start off with you. And, just so everyone knows, when you're a Cat 2, you're at 110. A Cat 3 is 111, but of course, the Hurricane Center does everything in 5 mile per hour increments. So it'd be, 110, 115. But when you're right on the border of Cat 2, Cat 3, or Cat 1, Cat 2, the damage difference is
exponentially with the wind, and that's really important to know that. So it's not just, it's a little bit stronger. It's a lot different. So let's talk about this, guys. We're going to watch this thing weaken upon landfall, and it may weaken pretty rapidly, frankly, but still, you've got a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane coming ashore with rain and wind literally collapsing over Acadiana, which is where I am, which will lead to power outages even inland. But how odd is it, Tevin Wooten, that you may not see the right front side of the hurricane, which we focus in on a lot, but yet we're so worried about the west side that, that may be the bigger story at the end of this in what happens in Lake Charles.
Yeah, Jim, it's going to be that north side and that west side that I think sees the strongest winds, perhaps 80 to 90 mile an hour for some of the biggest gusts. And speaking of winds, anytime you have a tropical system as such, Steph, it doesn't just shut off automatically. The winds take time to die down, and so does the storm surge.
Yeah, it does. And that's going to be, mainly on the east side is where we have that biggest water rise. With Laura, we had it 17.5 feet on that east side. And that big push, I'm worried about Vermilion Bay, up towards Dalcombe and New Iberia. Those areas are really probably going to see that highest water rise. But, that's not the only spot, Jim. All these areas have been worn out from storms, even over to Mississippi and Florida. You'll get the rip current and you'll get some erosion. We don't have to worry too much, but you're still going to see that water rise that far east.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is what's been beaten down. Okay, it's been absolutely beaten down, those beaches. Any kind of barriers and things like that are gone. All right, guys, rainfall, we're going to see a big footprint here, 5 to 8 inches coming north. That should dissipate as well as we mix dry air into the system. But still, we're talking 2-3 inches all the way as far north as Memphis.
When you get real, when your cameras roll,
this is something nobody can imagine.
Our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh. Jaw-dropping.
Nope, all the way back home. It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Well, traffic on Interstate 10 crawling out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and away from the path of dangerous Delta. Cruelly, 2020 is sending a second hurricane hurtling towards this city of some 80,000 people. Landfall expected southeast Louisiana, perhaps just to the east of Lake Charles. We will be watching this as it gets closer and let you know the exact spot at where it will come in around the dinner time hour tonight. Look at the satellite imagery of this monster. It is a very large storm. You see that cloud shield really stretching from Texas all the way over east along I-10. And this is coming in the Louisiana coast just 43 days after Hurricane 4. Category 4 Laura. Welcome back into AMHQ. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams live in Jennings, Louisiana. Of course, we have Jim Cantori, Tevin Wooten, Jen Carfagno as our crew this morning, and we will continue around the clock live coverage as this notorious season continues. We have not had 5 hurricanes make landfall since the notorious 2005 season, and today's landfall will make a 5th this year. Let's tell you what we know. Delta will become the 4th tropical cyclone to hit the state of Louisiana this season. That ties a record, okay, that was set in 2002. Calcasieu and Lake Charles are under a dusk to dawn curfew. West Calcasieu Cameron Hospital relocating patients to Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And Saturday's college football game between Florida Atlantic and Southern Miss in Hattiesburg, Mississippi has been postponed. So let's show you what this system is doing right now and what it looks like. You know, when you look at the satellite, you don't see this well-defined eye. You just don't have this super perfect structure of this hurricane, and we'll take that. We don't want a big beast coming into the Louisiana coast. Now, if you can look underneath those clouds and look at the radar, that's what we want to show you. You can actually see the eye. The radar is starting to pick up that eye. You know, it's sending a beam out from where we are located here on land opposed to the satellite, which is the IR, I should say, the infrared is coming from more of us coming from the satellites. But you can see that eye wall is there. It's not like we don't have one. It's just covered up by some clouds. So right now, a Category 3 at 120-mile-an-hour winds. Our next full update will be at 11 o'clock. We'll get an intermediate update at 8. We'll see how the Hurricane Center adjusts it. But the coast is ready. This place, I got to tell you, is pretty boarded up. We have hurricane warnings. Of course, surge will also be a big issue, especially to the east, over towards Vermilion Bay. Dalcom up towards that area is going to push all the water inland. And then, speaking of inland, once it makes landfall, potentially it's a Category 2, it then continues to move all the way up towards Nashville. Areas, Jim, which do not need any more rain, and even just a little bit of wind could obviously take down some trees. So I think everyone in the path of this should just be like, well, there's the possibility I could lose power even if I live inland. So let me figure out where my flashlight is.
Yeah. Well, it's really weird too. I've seen weaker winds cause more wind damage in places as they move inland, even though we're gonna have a weakening storm coming inland here. So, you know, like where a 30-mile-an-hour wind with a thunderstorm gust may not cause the wind damage, it kind of does with you know, a tropical system. So maybe it's the longevity and the kind of the swishingness that goes along with it. Guys, we're in downtown Breaux Bridge here. Okay, so we're north and east of where Stephanie is in I'm in St. Martin County. And you can see behind me here, you know, we don't have a lot of places that are boarded up. I mean, this is just one kind of corner building in through here, but I can tell you, because we've been here and I can look down away from where a camera is protected from the rain, we don't have that. But we do have some sandbags out, some tape on the windows, and they're really kind of expecting almost the same type of weather that they got with Laura in through here. All right, this is pretty awesome. If you're a Met geek like me, you're absolutely loving life right now, because what they've done is they've taken the research mobile weather radar from Oklahoma University, all right, the University of Oklahoma, and brought it all the way down to Lake Charles to take the place of the Lake Charles radar, because you remember that was wiped out with Laura. All right, it's incapable right now, and they don't have it built back up. So they brought the mobile weather radar down from OU to take the place of that. And you can see the data. It's already starting to come in here. So this will give us a real nice look at what's coming in with the banding, where the high winds are and things like that. So really cool to add that missing piece to the puzzle. All right, so Lake Charles, again, here we go. We're talking about really the worst of this coming in later this afternoon into the early evening hours, where, again, as I mentioned with Tevin earlier, it's weird to focus on the west side of a storm because a lot of the weather is usually on the east side, but lighter winds are the problem because they are so beaten up in Lake Charles. So it's not going to take huge hurricane gust there, like we would normally see on the east side of a storm, and that's my point with that. 5 to 8 inches either way. You can see that footprint that goes all the way up into Lake Charles. Really nice definition from the HRRR model here as to what happens with this as it comes ashore for a multitude of reasons. Sheer, dry air, as well as cooler ocean temperatures. This thing starts to fall apart. But another hit, the 10th landfall of the 2020 season coming up.
His most trusted TV news network,
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
A very unfortunate scene here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. This is a sea of blue roof tarps. As far as the eye can see in Lake Charles, this was shot yesterday, almost exactly 6 weeks after Hurricane Laura roared through southwestern Louisiana. It left a trail of debris, smashed trees, fallen power lines, and damaged or destroyed buildings in its wake. Much of that debris, by the way, still remains piled up on several of the streets here. One of those streets right behind me. Welcome back to AMHQ and our continuing coverage of Hurricane Delta. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten. We are in Lake Charles. Just to go back to Laura for a brief moment, when we spoke to the mayor in the immediate aftermath, he said not a single neighborhood in Lake Charles was untouched from Laura, and now we have to deal with Delta. And it's not just our friends in Lake Charles dealing with Delta. All across portions of the northern Gulf Coast, we're dealing with some sort of impact from Delta. Let's work our way into portions of eastern Texas here, Beaumont and Port Arthur. We hop on the interstate on I-10. A lot of people were actually traveling that interstate just yesterday to get out of harm's way, but they were working their way westbound. We'll work our way eastbound. You've got rain and thunderstorms all day today. Of course, those strong winds as well coming in, that easterly flow, eventually going through it all over again. It's not only demoralizing, but extremely stressful for the residents of Lake Charles.
Just 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Laura ripped apart the home of Deborah and Jerome Lestraps.
It's very draining, and to have to pack up and leave again, you know, that's a little stressful.
That's the bedroom area here.
Wind and water damage from that storm are forcing them to gut their home. Now they're worried again. What will Delta do?
Had to leave.
This is our home away from home, camping in our backyard.
The Lestraps have been living in this mobile trailer for 6 weeks. Jerome plans to ride out Hurricane Delta in their home that's being rebuilt, while Deborah is evacuating with her elderly mother.
Here I have an air mattress or a cot, and that's where I'm going to live here until all of this is over with.
So you're going to hunker down during Delta inside here?
Yes.
And why is that? Why aren't you leaving?
Because I want to be home to make sure that our home is okay, and you're not going to have looters that's going to be trying to get into your home and take what you have or make matters worse.
About 15 miles away in Iowa, Louisiana, the Becknells are in a similar situation, repairing their roof and getting ready to evacuate again.
It is like a dream, and you want to wake up, and it's not going to be here. You know, it's not going to be true, but it is. Sorry.
No, it's got to be.
Yeah, it's very, very emotional. Very. But you got to keep going, and you got to say, it'll be okay. You know, it's going to be fine, and it will be. We're strong people.
For 35 years, this has been home. The Becknells raised their kids here. Across the street, the broken trees from their yard are piled up. The neighbors, a few doors down, have set up a makeshift kitchen on the front lawn because their home isn't structurally safe. The last thing this block needs is another hurricane.
I believe that the Lord's going to protect us, and we'll have a home. Anyway.
What would you compare this to in your life? Anything else?
No, nothing. You just can't let yourself get down. It's easy to get down, but you have to stay strong.
Because that's what families here do during hurricane season. Stay Louisiana strong. Robert Ray, The Weather Channel.
The resiliency and the spirit of the folks in Lake Charles, unmatched. I've been here 3 times now since Laura, and every single time we've been greeted with smiles, hugs and hellos. Of course, a lot of people did flee or evacuate Lake Charles yesterday in advance of Delta. Let's work our way towards the east now. That's where we find Jim Cantore. He's in Breaux Bridge. And Jim, rain is the name of the game for the folks that perhaps are not near the center of the storm and inland too.
Right. Yeah, and we're already seeing some of that rain too. We've got an old front down here as well that's going to provide us with the rain. We've already had that this morning with flash flood warnings near the Baton Rouge area. So you can see that certainly where that little rain footprint is. We had 5 to 9 inches of rain, so that's right in the likely area of where we expect this heavy rain. The other thing, not only are we going to see dry air help weaken the system upon landfall, but that's also going to help, if you will, dry out the system and maybe not give us as persistent a rain bands. But somewhere there will set up to where we see double-digit rainfall totals come out of this, and that area will come all across Louisiana. So unlike corn, I found out yesterday, the sugar cane will lay down, but they will be able to pick it back up again. So it's not a loss in harvest. Like, for example, when the corn lays over, that's the end of the crop right there. They just have to move on. But you can see this thing coming ashore again early evening, falling apart rather quickly here, but the rain, of course, kind of raining itself out all the way up through northern Louisiana, into West Tennessee, into western Mississippi, also southeast parts of Arkansas. 1 inch or more, a little bit more in Houston. This is not going to be a flood problem for you. Lake Charles, Breaux Bridge, these are the areas here in Acadiana where we're looking at maybe 5 to 8 inches. We continue to keep you covered. Stephanie Abrams joins us from Jennings in just a moment.
When your cameras roll,
This is something nobody can imagine.
our experts react.
What do you do?
Oh my gosh! Jaw-dropping.
Nope, 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 all the way back home.
It doesn't get better than this.
Don't miss all new episodes of Weather Gone Viral, Sunday nights at 9, here on the Weather Channel. Get your daily dose of everything weather.
Wow! Boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Weather Today from the Weather Channel. New episodes every day, only on Quibi.
Welcome back into the Weather Channel. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams in Jennings, Louisiana, and we want to show you what it looked like. This is their main street, and I will say they are very prepared here, as they should be, because we could get that northern eye wall here as we head around that dinner time hour. A lot of places are boarded up, and you see this a lot, which is actually a very smart thing to do in hurricane-prone areas. As you take the boards up and put them down, they number the boards so they know exactly where they go. And what we want to do is take a little walk down Main Street. That boarded up. It doesn't look like this business is boarded up at all. And as we continue down the walk, there also are a lot of places that have sandbags. Now, I asked them about flooding. And this area doesn't necessarily flood because of surge, but because of rainfall, you could get some flooding. And you'll see this business actually has some sandbags and tape as well on the doors here to perhaps keep any little bit of moisture out from that system. And then as we continue down the way, this is a business that is wall-to-wall boards. They don't even have to number their boards because it is just board after board after board. You can't even tell what kind of business this is until you look at the sign. You see that it is some sort of maybe a dress shop. Actually, I can see in between some boards there, a little bit of a dress shop there. So the winds will pick up. It's been a little bit breezy this morning, but we anticipate as we head around that dinner time, I'll be back up as this storm system comes ashore from 5 to 9 this evening for landfall. And we really could get nailed with that northern eye wall and that east wind coming in. So we expect very gusty conditions here. I think the wind damage will probably be the biggest issue where we are located because we're a bit away from the water. We're right along I-10 10. Now, there are bayous and areas of water around here, but I do think that the surge issue is going to be closer to the shore, and Jen will talk about that momentarily. But it is going to be wind, and it's not only us here into Jennings. I'm representing all of you here along the Gulf Coast, from Texas to Mississippi and Florida. And by the way, portions of Mississippi could actually see some significant wind from this too. And remember, it's been already saturated on the ground, and as this storm system moves in, it takes a minute to wind down. I mean, Jackson, we could see, 40-mile-an-hour winds. That could take down a tree. So keep that in mind. I think that you still should be prepared, even if you are inland, and make sure, if there are trees around your house, you might think they're sturdy, but think twice about that and just be careful. Power outages obviously will be a huge issue with this system, as it always is with these hurricanes when they come ashore with all the above ground lines, especially here in the south. That's what majority of the power systems are. So, Jen, the good news is people really are prepared. There was gas stations where they had the pumps all wrapped in plastic, so they're secure. They were out of gas in some places as well. So the people here are thankfully taking it seriously.
And that's a good point you bring up about gas. That's something we always do when we're in the field, Steph, is gas up the day of landfall to make sure that you have a full tank of gas, because you never know what kind of power out is going to impact those gas stations afterwards. All right, let's talk about the surge. And Steph mentioned this here in the area that she was yesterday, Delcombe. They're going to see significant surge. Where she is today in Jennings, it's going to be more of a wind threat. So I want to focus in on the surge threat. These storm surge inundation maps that are available from the National Hurricane Center really show the details of where, because it really matters where you are, where the waterways are. Steph was down in here yesterday and around Delcombe and Erath. These are some of the towns that are really going to get into that surge, that 7 to 11 foot surge, potentially that will come in, completely fill in your first floor of your home, right? Everything's going to be moving around, your chairs, your couches, your carpets, all inundated with water. That kind of surge will float your vehicles. So that's why you evacuate in those areas. Now, let's also talk waves, too, because that water rise is already happening because of the big waves. This buoy, 42002, this one had waves of 35 feet earlier this morning. It's come down in wave height right now because the storm is moving off to the north. But by the way, there's another buoy out here, 42001. That was taken out by Laura. So we only had that one, 42002, to give us the data from. Water rise already, it's been about a foot, 1.4 here, Calcasieu Pass, freshwater canal locks. I'm watching these in particular today at the time of high tide, which comes in this evening. It should be just past the time of landfall. If they coincide at the same time, that would certainly raise the risk even more. But it's not going to be good timing. We are going to see that water coming up at the same time the tide is rising. Coastal flood warnings are up, including around Houston and Galveston Bay. That actually is in effect until Saturday afternoon. And there is a high surf warning here in South Texas, all the way down to South Padre Island. This is the first high surf warning that the Weather Service in Brownsville has issued since 2013. And that was because of Hurricane Ingrid, which was close to Galveston. You think about how far away, Tevin, that Delta is from the Brownsville area. And so I think that speaks to the size and to the buildup of the waves and water and why we're going to see such impacts, Tevin.
Yeah, Jen, I'm glad that you covered all of those watches and warnings and advisories, because so often we say a hurricane is not just a specific point on a map, and that illustrates it perfectly. And even beyond landfall, Hurricane Delta will bring significant impacts into portions of the Mississippi River Valley and Tennessee as well. Let's talk about the flash flood risk that we're expecting to see. It's because of this, the rainfall. This is a future radar, or just a picture of what Delta may look like as we go throughout the day today. And eventually into our Saturday, we stop at 11 p.m. here, northern portions of Mississippi, western Tennessee, and northern Alabama as well. You're in line for heavy rainfall. The heaviest of the rain, of course, towards the south and west. But as Delta moves through, it does degrade just a little bit, but still enough to bring us a flash flood threat, and also strong to damaging winds. So winds between 35 and 45 miles an hour. That's certainly a possibility in Oxford and Tupelo, Mississippi, right around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. Even into Memphis, too, and Rocket City. We're talking about you and Huntsville, Alabama. Beyond that, the upslope flow through the Appalachians, that brings us 5 to 8 inches of rainfall per this map. And don't forget, you can continue listening to the Weather Channel on Sirius Digital Channel 721.
This morning, powerful Hurricane Delta is making a beeline for the U.S. Gulf Coast. And the storm-weary state of Louisiana is bracing for impact. The major Category 3 hurricane will lash the coast with heavy rain, gusty winds, and potential life-threatening surge. Nearly 6 million people are under tropical alert from Mississippi to Texas. And of course, here in Louisiana and Lake Charles, devastated by Hurricane Laura just over a month ago. Of course, we have around-the-clock coverage for you here of this hurricane. We have teams that are spread out. We have Tevin Woon, who is in Lake Charles, showing us those piles of debris, the tarps, and how little wind it will take to disrupt that area. Also, Jim Cantori is off to my east, and Breaux Bridge, and Jen Carfagno is at the Weather Channel headquarters for us this morning. I'm meteorologist Stephanie Abrams, live in Jennings, Louisiana. And let's give you the very latest on what's happening with this system. Of course, the 10th tropical cyclone to hit the U.S. The 10th tropical, that'll be record-setting. The last time we had 9 was 1916, so we've tied that record, and now we're going to break it. And it has just been exhausting. People in Lake Charles are trying to get out while they're still in the process of cleaning up. Here's I-10, bumper-to-bumper traffic yesterday. Lake Charles is a city of 80,000 wounded, very heavily wounded by Category 4 Hurricane Laura 43 days ago, and now it is just limping. The whole city is limping as we are staring down Hurricane Delta. Let's show you the latest, of course. We have the hurricane hunters that are flying through this storm. We'll have 2 hurricane hunters. Sometimes they fly at lower levels, upper levels, but what they do is they gather data of the hurricane and the environment around it. We can put that into the models and have a better idea of what's going to be happening with this storm. And what we know is happening with this storm is that as a Category 3, it's expected to be a Category 2 at landfall. And, we've been talking over the last few hours how if a storm is a Category 2, you can't just say, oh, it's not a major. A lot of people tend to do that and blow it off. The eye wall of a Category 2 will cause damage. It will cause bad damage. And not, also with the surge on the east side of the storm. So that's something that we're going to have to watch for. That water rise, Vermilion Bay, and then going north of that. And also Mississippi, you guys could see a little erosion, a little water rise, and into Florida as well. It's not something you have to, change your plans for, but you don't go in the water, even into the panhandle of Florida, because you could run into that rip current. But as the system moves north, it's going to encounter some cooler waters that will affect it, and also some wind shear. And it's already being affected by that, because when you look at the satellite, you don't see that well-defined eye. That's in the satellite. But when we go underneath the satellite, we'll show you that radar. You see the eye in the eye wall. So again, don't let these little things fool you when you're like, oh, it's just a big blob, it's fine. I'm telling you, I've been even in the eye wall of a Category 1 and experienced significant damage. And I will say, Cantori, we were in Florence, in North Carolina. Yep. And remember, the hurricane was coming in, and it was also falling apart, but there was a lot of damage from that system. So, just because it's a Category 2 weakening when it's coming ashore, you cannot let your guard down.
No, especially ones that stall or slow down like that one was doing. It just it limped into the coast, if you remember, Steph. So we dealt with that for hours, literally sitting in that eye wall. Yep. And of course, Florence was once a Cat 4. So, like this one is going to wind down. But like you said, exactly, we still get hammered with ones, that's for sure. So let's talk about this. Some interesting stuff, certainly from the hurricane hunters. Not really seeing the pressure drop. Not really seeing the winds measure up to what we have out there. So that's a little bit of good news. Nice sense of optimism there. That said, we still have a 40-mile wide wind field from the radius, so it's 80 miles, and then you have a 320 miles across in terms of the whole diameter here. So big wind across this thing. You can see it very nicely on the buoys and also the oil rigs, because there are weather instruments on the oil rigs. And granted, those are a little higher up, but whether you're 80 feet or 160 feet, in terms of getting those measurements, we can really get a good idea of what's coming in with some of these bands. And we had a couple of showers here, some pretty heavy showers. Just kind of rolled through Breaux Bridge. Some of the heaviest rain has been north of Baton Rouge, where we still have some flood warnings going on there. And you can see the footprint there of even 5 to 8, a little spot of 8 or more inches, which was over 9 inches there, just east of New Road. So these little ancillary impacts, even though they're not directly the hurricane itself coming ashore, are going to be big, and they're going to be watched today, because any of these areas that get heavy rain before we get into the main batch of rain with the hurricane will flood easier, as you know, and that's why there's a higher risk of flooding across Acadiana, Jen, and also north into north central Louisiana. Just incredible, the beating that this state has taken this hurricane season, and unfortunately, we're going to take another one in spots tonight.
Yeah, and Steph brought this up earlier, Jim, just about people are asking, why is this area of the country getting hit time and time again? We've seen so many of the storms this season getting into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's just been this very persistent pattern with just enough of a weakness in that big ridge of high pressure to allow these storms to come up to the Gulf.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, this one is going to be steered into Louisiana from a trough. I mean, Jen, sometimes if the trough moves in fast, heck, it takes it east and it rips it apart. But no, just the timing of the pattern and the persistence of it, like you said, allow it to come up into Louisiana. It really, and we're still today, what, 15 miles from Laura's landfall?
And we saw that in 2004, we had Jean and Francis, back to back like that here. But it doesn't happen often that we see storms in this close proximity.
No.
And folks are ready for it, though. This has been that kind of season that at least awareness is raised, if there's any good thing to say about the season. For folks preparing in southern Louisiana, it was clearing out the grocery store shelves. This was the scene at a store in Lafayette where people shop for bread, milk, and other essentials. This as Paris emergency officials warned people who plan to ride out the storm at home that emergency responders may not be able to help them after a certain point.
If people decide to stay, during a weather event like this, there are particular times that emergency vehicles cannot respond. So if you're talking about the winds get above, 70 miles per hour, then it's unsafe even for emergency responders vehicles.
Yeah, and we're going to have those kind of winds. I'm going to show you where that will be as Delta makes its way inland. Landfall coming in later on this afternoon into the evening. And then we will be watching through the overnight winds, tropical storm force winds ramping up. This is 70 mile per hour winds all the way up to Alexandria. And so those were the kind of winds they were talking about with first responders not being able to get out during. The wind shear that we are waiting for and watching for to help it knock down Delta a little bit. It's working, but not fast. I mean, I have to say, yes, the winds are not increasing in strength, but they're not decreasing fast either. So we are anticipating that we will have a strong Cat 2 as it approaches the coast. The fact that we do have some cooler sea surface temperatures, the lower ocean heat content will also help reduce the strength and at very least prevent any more strengthening as it gets towards the coastline. I know that's a big concern, especially considering so many of the storms this season that were strengthening at landfall, like Laura, like Sally. It won't be that kind of situation, but it's going to be bad. We've got those rain bands coming in at lunchtime, looking at overspreading the area. You're in tropical storm force winds at this point. The eye wall coming in as we get into the late afternoon and evening. This is 3 o'clock, and we're getting in some of the strongest of the winds. Remember, that eye is expanded. It's now between about 35 and 40 miles wide, the eye, and on that northern edge is the eye wall where you have the strongest of the winds. So that's coming in this evening. And then as we get overnight, yes, they'll be weakening. The central pressure will be coming up. The wind speed will be coming down. But you still have a larger wind field, too, as it moves inland. And it's going to be some strong tropical storm. Hurricane force winds will come in this evening. The rainfall will be 5 to 8 inches, and that is tough considering all of the blue tarps that we have on those roofs there in Lake Charles. It was just 6 weeks ago that Lake Charles was devastated by Hurricane Laura, and Tevin has been there a few times since then, actually watching the recovery. Tevin, would you estimate that a lot of the town left or a lot of people staying for this storm?
Jen, I don't think there is any question about it. I think the majority of people here in Lake Charles left, and I don't actually think you had to tell them twice. Once they heard another storm was coming, they all left. In fact, yesterday we were watching portions of I-210 and I-10 become gridlocked at times because so many people were trying to get out of harm's way. A lot of people did go west into places like Houston or Dallas or Galveston, Texas, versus going east because a lot of that storm, or the dirty side of the storm, is still on the eastern side of where we are here in Lake Charles and beyond that. But I want to give you a lay of the land because tarps, trees, trash bags, and rubble litter almost every single street here. Look at this giant tree. This is not just one, it's one of many in this neighborhood. In fact, known for its trees, and a lot of that history has been torn down because of Laura. That was just 6 weeks ago, and now we're preparing for Delta again. It's not just the trees, though. Take a look at this siding. cabinets, a couch, drawers, everything, sheetrock, everything from inside this home. It was gutted and brought out as residents wanted to begin the recovery process as early as 6 weeks ago, as early as Laura moving out. But the problem now, Delta is moving in, and residents, a sense of disbelief looms this area as residents try to clean up from Laura, and now we get prepared for Delta. In fact, it's just one of the things with the second hurricane of the 2020 season that these folks have to stare at.
No way. There's just no way. It can't be possible.
With a city a sea of blue tarps after Hurricane Laura, Lake Charles Mayor Nick Hunter says safety first as Delta approaches.
All of those emotions about couldn't be, unprecedented, impossible, they are now completely aside at the moment. And we can worry about that later.
Lake Charles under an evacuation order, but some will stay.
We fared pretty good for Laura, and we don't have any fall damage stuff, so we're going to stay and make sure other people's places stay safe.
Traffic on I-10 thick as thousands flee.
They're having to evacuate again for this storm because their homes just can't withstand what's about to happen.
Bobby Kao boarding up. He's worried about people without solid protection over their heads.
Those that have been protected by the roof tarps are probably going to have problems again, and the tarps are going to come out.
Grocery store shelves thinning out. Shoppers like Neil Derwin snapping up generators. He, like thousands of others in Lake Charles, lost power for weeks after Laura.
We don't want to stay in a hotel for very long. We want to get the generator, get to the hotel, come back so we can stay at our house.
Laura's debris still lining streets. Trash that Delta could turn into dangerous projectiles.
It's bad for the Lake Charles because the situation is here is not good, you know. All the roofs are gone and everything, you know. So good luck for us, you know.
And what's so unfortunate about this situation is that the power that just got restored maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago as Tropical Storm Beta moved in with its rainfall, perhaps some of those power poles may be coming down because of trees or any sort of loose lines that may still lie behind after Laura. Now we're looking at Delta. That's the latest here from Lake Charles. Let's go eastbound now to, I believe, our Jim Cantori Stephanie in Jennings, Louisiana. Steph.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the winds with this system. And what we all have to remember is how hurricanes work. When the pressure drops, the winds go up. They have an inverse relationship. And believe it or not, what are the chances a hurricane goes over a buoy? Now, yes, there are a lot of buoys out there, but to get the dead center of a hurricane over a buoy still, I think, is a pretty impressive feat. Well, it did go over a buoy in the Gulf of Mexico, buoy 42002. And look what happens here. As that pressure starting to drop, there's your eye wall. That pressure starting to drop, the winds ramp up. That's the eye wall. You see them. There was a gust actually, or they got a measurement of 101 I saw recently in the eye wall. And then you see the wind and the pressure drop, because in the center of the hurricane you have the lowest pressure, and the winds, it's completely calm. And then you see everything kind of ramp up on the eastern side of it. But that's just right. And I still think it's incredible to see that happen. You're going to see those winds ramp up, and we could see them all the way up to where we are in Jennings here along I-10. We're in between basically Lake Charles and Lafayette, and we could see our winds gusting 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. We'll watch for that. But again, it's not just Louisiana. Those of you into Port Arthur, those of you over into Mississippi, you could see some of those strong winds. Even stretching, by the way, into Alabama, you could get some gusty winds out of this. So watch out for power outages. Obviously, that main swath is going to be where we do have those strongest winds right here from the coast, nudging towards Alexandria. But, you know, Jim, even as this goes inland, you know, when they interact with troughs, as you know, you well know, everything kind of expands out even more and makes for a lot of people feeling those breezier conditions.
Right, so instead of just having a consolidated area around the eye wall, Steph, now you expand out that wind field. It's gushy, it's changing directions, it's persistent. So it's not just one little thunderstorm that comes through, it's persistent winds for hours, and they build up and then start to decrease, and in some cases come in from a different direction. So that's what causes a tremendous amount of the wind damage and power outages, and that potential exists here from Acadiana on north toward Alexandria. Steph mentioned the buoy, how unique it is to actually have a storm going right over the buoy. Well, what we can also see is where the waves are before it comes over. Huge wave set moved through. We topped out at 33 feet on that buoy, and unfortunately those waves are coming toward the Louisiana coast as we speak. And you can see kind of the size of that wave pocket, but also notice how these waves have propagated west of the center. So yeah, they're going to propagate out in all directions. It's a big wave machine, big wave pump. So in South Texas, we got high surf warnings for 10 to 14 foot waves. That is huge waves coming in to South Padre Island. Can't recall seeing a lot of those, to be honest with you, for South Texas. But the water's coming up. You can see the surge anywhere from 1 to 3 feet. That'll continue to be the case. Of course, it's maximized at landfall to the right of the center, and we are expecting 7 to 11 feet, especially through Vermilion Bay. I think that'll be one of the hardest hit areas. It will be your highest surge of the season, regardless of the strength of the hurricane at landfall. Our live team coverage of Delta continues.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Some brave men and women have been taking off and staring right into the eye of Hurricane Delta. This is video from the Air Force Hurricane Hunters of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. And on one mission, when they're over the Gulf of Mexico, as they cross straight into the eye of the storm at the same time that NOAA's Hurricane Hunter aircraft did, and they could see it. Isn't that amazing? I saw a video actually online where you could actually see the other plane. I mean, great visibility. It happens. They fly through multiple planes in the storm at once here, often in a storm like this. But I think to get that kind of visibility is certainly a big deal. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at what else is happening when it comes to impacts. And we are already seeing some rain. The moisture from Delta was interacting with the front, brought us tremendous rain around Baton Rouge here. That thankfully has lifted to the north. We were dealing with a lot of flooding overnight. Looks like that has gotten better there, but we still have some rain. And folks who are traveling, you know, I-20 is probably your choice over I-10 today. It should be. But look, I-20 is not a good ride from Jackson to Shreveport. We are in the rain and already getting that moisture spreading in from Hurricane Delta. From Houston to Lake Charles, we are in some rain right now. It gets worse throughout the day. We do also have the risk for severe weather with the isolated chance of tornadoes spin-ups here into southeastern Louisiana, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Morgan City, even over to Biloxi and Mississippi. Make sure you have a way to get warnings and keep that close by you throughout the day today and the overnight, because these kind of storms, if there is rotation, usually spins up very fast. Timing out the rainfall too. Look, we know that all the issues, we've got the wind risk, we've got the surge risk, but we also have a risk of just driving in really heavy rainfall here. And so we urge you to stay off the roadways. By lunchtime, from Lake Charles to Baton Rouge, we are completely inundated with heavy rainfall and seeing that landfall happen later this afternoon into the evening. In fact, in Lafayette, your curfew goes into effect starting at 4 o'clock. So there's no reason to be out on the roads at this point. And let's go back out to Stephanie Abrams, who is in Jennings, Louisiana. And Steph, we're really covering all the different aspects of the storm. There's the power outages. There's also that risk, of course, for surge, where you're looking at yesterday in Delcom. And now today, you're right where we may get the eye wall.
Yeah.